Welcome back to Crawford-Clark Close-Up and our James Bond retrospective. In this video we're looking at the traditional cold opens attached to all but the very first Bond adventure. We're talking about the mini adventures that open each Bond movie and get fans pumped for the remainder of the film. Whether they're central to the main narrative thread or just small 10-minute adventures all their own apart from the rest of the story, we're here to rank all 23 to date. Before we start, if you enjoy this video please click subscribe at the top of the page to ensure you don't miss out on any new content when we upload it. Come and find Crawford-Clark Close-Up on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. You can also drop us an email to crawfordclarkcloseup@gmail.com with suggestions for things we can review on the channel. So we start at the bottom of the pile at number 23 with Diamonds Are Forever, with a joke of a montage of sequences with Bond trying to track down Blofeld. Cairo Cards, Hit Me represents some of the terrible dubbing, and the scene is played entirely for laughs. This is the second James Bond in consecutive films after On Her Majesty's Secret Service, and Connery's delivery even seems very stilted. The sequence inverts the death of 007 motif of previous films by having Bond dispatch Blofeld, and this opening has the distinction of being the first film in the series to feature the film's central villain in the pre-titles. All that being said, this is still the weakest of the pre-title scenes in the series to date. At number 22, it's Quantum of Solace. In the first direct continuation in the series, here is a straight-up action sequence with a destructive car chase in Italy. Bond is carrying Mr. White in the boot of the car from the end of Casino Royale and making his way to M to allow MI6 to interrogate Mr. White. The editing is what lets this sequence down. It's so erratic, like the rest of the film. Also, for some reason, we get fancy italics for location cards. Not one of the most memorable or particularly effective Bond openings. At number 21, with some shockingly bad back projection from Moore, who clearly wasn't there with the second unit filming the sequence, A View to a Kill's opening wants to showcase great stunt work like Spy, but falls very short. The action is poor, the use of California Girls is as cheesy as it gets, and the whole sequence is a bit of a mess. The weakest of the Moore-era openings after a couple of decent ones with Eyes Only and Octopussy. One saving grace is John Barry's vibrant score for the sequence, however. At number 20, we have Moonraker, a by-the-numbers setup that's designed in the same fashion as previous film The Spy Who Loved Me, only having less impact. The Moonraker shuttle is launched, cut to M asking Moneypenny where 007 is, before we cut to Bond making out with a villainous woman, before Bond in peril with an action stunt set piece. There's no denying that the aerial stunt work is impressive from stunt artists B.J. Worth and Jake Lombard, but it's not nearly as memorable as it could have been, and certainly lacking after the killer Union Jack parachute in the opening of Spy. The sequence also concludes by playing for laughs, with Jaws falling into the circus tent. Bond's 12th adventure is at number 19, and it opens with promise, with Moore's Bond placing flowers at Tracy's graveside in a respectful nod back to On Her Majesty's Secret Service, whilst maintaining the continuity of the character overseen by a different actor. The sequence quickly becomes a parody, with a figure who we're to assume is Blofeld remote-controlling Bond's helicopter across Beckton Gas Works before dispatching Blofeld Tom and Jerry style down a chimney stack. The score from Bill Conti is entertaining, if a definite product of the 1980s, but the sequence ends up falling a little flat. Still, I'll take this over Moonraker's opening sequence. At number 18, Thunderball opens with a coffin bearing the initials JB, another cryptic Death of 007 opening that the early Bonds used to tease audience with. We quickly see that Bond is alive, watching the funeral with a French contact, and that the funeral is for Spectre agent Jacques Bouvard, who has murdered some of Bond's colleagues. Bond smells something funny when the widow attending the service opens the car door by herself and tracks her back to her home before unmasking her in a tussle in her room as Bouvard himself. Bond ensures Bouvard is definitely dead before magically taking up a jetpack and helmet from the roof of the chateau and transporting himself down to the French contact and his DB5 before using the back jets on the car to hose down the chateau guards. It's a silly sequence, and the jetpack sequence, though clearly groundbreaking technology in its day, just looks terrible now with Connery so clearly back projected. One of the weaker pre-title sequences of the Connery era. Number 17 is Die Another Day. Bond surfs into his mission, steals the identity of Mr. Van Beek, Well, his sunglasses, and is flown into Colonel Moon's compound in Korea before setting off C4 in a suitcase of diamonds and hovercrafting away before being caught by Moon's father and tortured for information. It's an interesting anomaly for the series' 40th anniversary to have Bond fail his mission and get captured, and it's certainly the most interesting section of the film as a whole. If only they'd been a little braver by showing us more of the torture and roughing Bond up just a little. And number 16 is The Man with the Golden Gun. This is the third consecutive pre-titles to include the film's main villain, Scaramanga, plus one of the main Bond girls and the villain's henchman, and the second consecutively not to include James Bond. Golden Gun boasts an entertaining pre-titles which shows Scaramanga's elaborate skills of deception as he tries to track down his golden gun through his funhouse whilst being pursued by Rodney. It's far from being up there with the most engaging openings in the series, but it's also not even close to the worst. At number 15, we have You Only Live Twice. This is the first of the pre-title sequences in the series up to this point to have a greater stakes action sequence to open up the story, the rocket being swallowed by another spacecraft, followed by the third and most prolonged Death of 007 mock-up, as we see Bond on a bed which has been bullet-riddled. One of the more engaging of the 60s Bond openers, with an ominous score from John Barry underlining the action to boot. At number 14, Live and Let Die. Unless you count the dummy 007 in the opening of From Russia with Love, this is the first pre-title sequence not to include Bond. Instead, we get a brief glimpse of the main villain and main Bond girl, and are given the 3 agent kills around the world that Bond will investigate throughout the film. New York, New Orleans, and the Caribbean showcase imaginative death sequences in an intriguing opening sequence. Unlucky for some, at number 13, though not in this case, we return to 1963 and the first ever Bond pre-title sequence, From Russia with Love, wherein Donald Grant dispatches 007. The sequence is short and succinct compared to later lengthy sequences to start a Bond movie, but it's inspired and sets up just how cunning Grant is. Connery also plays up the imposter angle well, almost playing Bond as slightly inept, firing his gun in pure sight of Grant, as well as looking a little plastic in his features, as we quickly learn that this is a Spectre pawn who is being used as a test dummy to perfect Grant's skills. This is a well-executed sequence, and the first of 3 Connery pre-titles alone that insinuates, if only for the briefest of moments, that Bond has met his maker. At number 12, it's the latest instalment ahead of No Time to Die's imminent release. Spectre's gun barrel sequence fades to black and we get ominous white text proclaiming the dead are alive before we jump straight into the Day of the Dead in Mexico City and 1,500 extras in costume. The only real problem with the sequence is the desaturation of colour from the outset. The film doesn't showcase enough of the incredible costume and makeup on show to its fullest. It's nice to see Bond in makeup for the first time since Octopussy, however. Bond and Estrella in Mexico City go up to their hotel room before Bond quickly strips off his disguise and goes in pursuit of Marco Sciarra, whose mission it is to blow up the square. Bond fires from the rooftop at the briefcase containing the bomb, and the building collapses around him. From there, it's a full pursuit of a bloodied Sciarra into the main square to the helicopter. Very fast camera work at times makes it difficult to see what's happening. The best moments are when the action stops and you get to take in the visuals of the festival. A nice touch to round out the sequence is the theme song from Sam Smith coming in as Bond is flying the helicopter out. Just missing out on our top 10, but still a belter of an opening sequence, it's Octopussy. Bond impersonates a colonel and ends up inadvertently destroying the hangar of an airbase as we join 007 mid-mission. This is the best example, aside from Spy, of the classic action-packed bit of fluff opening sequences of the Bond series, and it's one of the best of the Moore era. We begin our top 10 with Tomorrow Never Dies. Opening in a snowy landscape in Russia, much like Brosnan's Bond debut GoldenEye, this sequence is a terrifically explosive action sequence. Bond is waiting to strike at a terrorist arms bazaar, whilst M, Robinson and others at MI6 are in the control room overseeing the situation. Lots of code names, a fitter, bulked up Brosnan in the lead role, and a great quip to end the sequence make this a solid Bond opening. At number 9, proving true the well-known adage that less is often more, we come to the stripped-back, black-and-white opening to the rebooted Bond in Casino Royale. Bond is earning his 00 status by making his 2 kills to earn his license. One is in flashback in a bathroom, a grisly death that showcases this harder-edged 007, and the other is of a bent MI6 operative called Dryden. It's the shortest pre-titles in the series since the days of early Connery, and it's an effective way for Daniel Craig's Bond to make his debut, segueing nicely into the film's title sequence. This is the first of only 3 times that the official films in the series have not opened with a gun barrel before the sequence itself. At number 8, it's The World Is Not Enough. Beginning in a banker's office in Bilbao and ending hanging from a hot air balloon above the Millennium Dome, this is becoming a trademark of the Brosnan Bond adventures, each pre-title sequence trying to outdo the one before it on the pure adrenaline action-packed stakes. This pre-title still has the distinction of being the longest in the series so far, at almost 14 minutes, and is also the first to feature Q in its sequence for 30 years since Majesty's. M and Moneypenny also appear once again, this also being Moneypenny's first appearance for 20 years since Moonraker. There's a fine balance between dialogue and action in this entertaining opener, and David Arnold's dynamic score sits this film comfortably amongst the best pre-title sequences in the series. In 007's spot, it's GoldenEye. Opening with an incredible bungee jump down a dam into a chemical weapons facility, Bond is in action alongside another 00, 006 Alec Trevelyan, until the pair are ambushed by General Oromov and his men before they can make their escape. It's an entertaining mini-adventure with all the prerequisite Bond trademarks. Brosnan and Bean have brilliant chemistry together. You can imagine the two having worked on other missions of this type before, not that we ever get to see this, so 006 getting shot is particularly crushing for Bond. This opening sequence actually works well with Eric Serra's edgier score. It's a shame it's not as effective throughout the rest of the film. Just finding itself missing out on the top 5, we have On Her Majesty's Secret Service, a film which has the distinction of being the first pre-title sequence in the series to feature M, Moneypenny and Q, as well as the new 007 introduced and the main Bond girl. There's a playful arrangement of the Bond theme from John Barry as our new Bond is taking a drive along the country roads, and excellent editing in the delay of introducing the new 007 to the audience, with lots of mid to close-up shots of Lazenby whilst driving, and then down on the beach. This is also the first Bond James Bond in a pre-title scene in the series. The ending shot and fourth wall breaking "This Never Happened to the Other Fella" has also never bothered this Bond fan either. Starting the top 5, we have License to Kill. Bond is with Felix and Sharkey on the way to Felix's wedding in Key West, when they get the green light that the infamous Fran Sanchez is in the Bahamas, and they attempt to bring him in. It's violent from the outset, with one of the most effective entrances of any Bond villain in the series, whipping his girlfriend for sleeping with another man, and getting his goons to remove the man's heart. This is another action-heavy opener with some great stunts, performed where possible again by Timothy Dalton. The sequence additionally marks the first time in 7 films since Man with a Golden Gun that the chief villain of the film features in the pre-titles. Michael Kamen's score is also fantastic, particularly when they're attempting to winch Sanchez's plane in, clear inspiration for Nolan's Dark Knight Rises over 20 years later. At number 4, we bring things up to date with the third pre-titles of the Craig films not to open with the traditional gun barrel. Instead, in Skyfall, Bond in silhouette walks the length of a corridor to find murdered agents. From here, we enter out into bustling Istanbul, Bond working alongside another MI6 agent, who of course we later learn is the new Moneypenny. M and Tanner are also overseeing the mission from MI6 HQ. This really is an exciting way to start the 50th anniversary film. No gimmicks, just wall-to-wall action, excellent stunt work, and a return to the death of 007, which we haven't seen since the beginning of You Only Live Twice. Beginning the top 3, we have Goldfinger. Only in Bond would you find a secret agent rising to the water's surface with a seagull strapped to his head before laying explosives and revealing perfect white dinner suit attire before disabling a heavy in a bathtub and delivering shocking, positively shocking. Connery truly delivers on all accounts in this premiere pre-title tease that's a trademark bit of nonsense before the film proper begins. In second place, we have the 10th Bond outing, released to celebrate the series' 15th anniversary, and the second pre-titles in the series to feature M and Moneypenny after On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Spy's opening is very much a recycled version of the action from the You Only Live Twice opening that will play a key part in the third act of the film later. Yet this pre-titles ranks as one of the series' most memorable for its second half. The first Moore Bond film to feature Moore's Bond in the opening sequence, as well as seeing Bond in peril as he skis towards the mountain edge and goes off the edge with the Union Jack parachute and a blast of the Bond theme. A classic sequence that's guaranteed to bring the house down whenever you see it. So the cream of the crop as mini adventures go, Living Daylights follows M overseeing 00s 2, 4 and 7 on a Ministry of Defence training exercise on the Rock of Gibraltar trying to evade capture by the SAS. It's the only time in the series to date that Bond has been seen on a training exercise with other 00s, and it's a brilliantly conceived and executed sequence. This pre-titles remarkably also marks 18 years since the new 007 was introduced in such a sequence, going back to Lazenby in Majesties. This sequence is thrilling, has the best entry for a new 007, unless you count Connery and Dr. No, and ends with Bond parachuting down to a woman on a boat to end his mission, and the no-nonsense delivery of Bond, James Bond. A perfect introduction to 007 number 4. So those are our 2 cents on the Bond pre-title sequences. Let us know your ranking in the comments below and what you think makes a solid opening to a Bond adventure. As we said at the beginning of the video, please subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed this video. James Bond will return as we enter the Pierce Brosnan era with our review of the 17th film in the series, GoldenEye. For now, thanks for watching, and until next time, that's a wrap.